It seems that President Joe Biden has started listening to the progressives and he's made a decision on student loan debt cancellation. Kinda. Let's check out some of the details here. There's a lot here, so let's check this out. The Washington Post reported on Friday that, according to 3 people familiar with the matter, Biden's latest loan forgiveness plan includes $10,000 in relief for federal borrowers who make under $150,000 in the previous year, or less than $300,000 for married couples who file jointly. This income threshold is slightly higher than previous reports that suggested Biden was considering capping the relief for those making under $125,000, $25,000 more. So Senators Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, Raphael Warnock met with Biden last week to urge him to go big on relief and hold off on issuing any executive action until he considers loan forgiveness for everyone. No decisions have been made yet, White House spokesman Vedant Patel told the Post. Still, the plans for relief could likely change and the timeline for that announcement remains uncertain, but as several administration officials have said, borrowers will know before student loan payments are set to resume after August 31st. Now, we've been talking about this from the $10,000 to the complete forgiveness for everyone's loans to how much $125 to $150 to $300. As all this is going through, the numbers are happening, but I'm not sure how many people are talking about. Then what? Where does this money go? Because the federal government was expecting to get some of this. Well, here's some answers. Wiping out $10,000 of debt per borrower could cost roughly $230 billion. That's according to estimates by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which is a nonpartisan think tank. However, restarting payments for borrowers, which have been on hold since March of 20, would bring additional money into federal coffers. The think tank said in March that pausing payments had cost the federal government $100 billion and would run around $50 billion per year to maintain. So canceled federal student loans would be immediately added to the federal deficit, which measures how the country owes more money than it takes in during a year, in case you didn't know. Analysts agree that canceling federal student loans would increase the deficit, but what they're split on is how significant that addition would be and how the government could eventually recoup the costs. Now, as far as those deficit details and things like that, here's the last little section, so one more point. The federal government had a $2.8 trillion deficit in fiscal year of 21, much of which was comprised of COVID-19 relief spending, including stimulus checks and emergency rental assistance. The deficit amounted to approximately 13% of GDP and accounted for the second largest deficit since the end of World War II. So to put that in perspective, deficits over the last 5 decades have averaged just 3% of GDP. The higher that percentage is, the less likely the country will be able to pay back its debts, of course. And the default could cause mass panic in the global financial system. So that same think tank, their estimate of the student loan cancellation costing $230 billion would add less than 1% to the 2021 deficit overall. And lastly, you guys, the government has 2 options to reduce this deficit, and I think we know these parts: decrease spending or raise taxes. That, according to some policy analysts, is how the cost will eventually make its way to the general public. So if you're gonna do decreasing spending, that's gonna go to people's normal folks, that they would receive childcare, things like that we've been proposing, that of course haven't happened yet, or raising some taxes. And you know what they're gonna say is, so the middle class is gonna get their taxes raised on them, and all the rich folks are gonna continue to get away like bandits. That's what the opponents will say.
Okay, so first of all, the context here is important. Forgiving a $10,000 student debt, Biden said he was considering doing it, and then everyone on TV attacked. Chuck Todd, it's a terrible time. Paul Begala on Real Time, terrible time. Jeanine Pirro, Greg Gutfeld on Fox News. This is the one thing that all the way from MSNBC to Fox News, every millionaire anchor agreed on. No, don't relieve any student debt, okay? Well, what about inflation? It's a what about the deficit? Okay, well, as JR just read to you, it's less than 1%. Okay, it's $230 billion, that's once, right? The defense budget is $800 billion every single year. It flies through Congress. In fact, the Pentagon asked for some gargantuan, ridiculous number loaded up with fat, and then Congress goes, no, we're gonna give you more, okay? They never talk about deficits, they never talk about inflation, as they okay those without any debate at all. So, and let alone the fact that Biden said that he was gonna increase corporate taxes back to not where they were, but remember Trump cut them from 35% all the way down to 21%. And Biden threatened to increase them to 28%, which would have brought in so much more money than any of this. It would have dwarfed it, it would have been great. And that wouldn't even bring it back to where it was before Trump. Of course, they've done absolutely nothing about that. But credit where credit is due, and this is actually generally good news, because when Biden said he might do it, and I saw every cable station attack it because they represent the rich, I thought, this thing's a goner. Okay, I mean, Biden, he's still listed having lunch with Tom Friedman. I mean, if he sees MSNBC anchors saying it's not a good idea, he'll panic, I thought, and be like, oh no, I didn't mean that. But he didn't. Credit where credit is due. It looks like he's actually gonna do the $10,000 student debt relief for people making under $150,000. That's a great development.
And there's cost savings to it too. First of all, the people that argue about inflation, the money that is coming back into people's pockets is money they can spend on life, and they can put that into our economy, which is suffering right now, which is the reason you do something like this. It is in fact stimulus to the economy. I mean, it's basic economics, and I'm not an economist. The other part of this is that you have to obviously prepare for the day you stop giving student loans. If you have complete forgiveness of student loans, the next day you're going to be giving student loans again. That's what the government has to prepare for. But the cost of managing these student loans is also exorbitant. It's not $230 billion, but it's a lot of money that would offset that number, if that number is even close to being accurate. The other side of this is what he can also do immediately is end completely any interest on these loans. Just bring all these loans to 0% as they've been during the pandemic. You can resume payments, but never put interest back in. The government doesn't need to be making money because, again, that's money that's going to be going back into the economy.
Really fast, because you talked about this kind of economic stimulus, and maybe that's reasons why they don't want to have this style of it, which I believe is people might get a little bit too comfortable. They might start thinking, oh, I can buy a car that's not used and beat up and about to fall apart. I'm gonna buy a new one because I have a little bit more money and I know it's not going out to all these things. But that makes people comfortable. And one thing we don't want is regular folks in America to be too comfortable or expect more, because then all these talking points about how you have to get back to work and take the minimum wage possible, because that's how you build up this corporate ladder or just any kind of working ladder that you can. And we've been sold that story since the beginning, since everybody's been born. It's like, you have to work as if you're in the fields and then make nothing, and then finally you'll live that American dream. If people start getting that after they've gone through college and maybe get some kind of relief, and then they pump that money back in because maybe they bought something like a house, a car, crazy, they might go, I expect to be able to do this again. We cannot have that, because then the energy in society's approach to how we do these things will change, and they don't know how to contain that tiger anymore.
And they have to bring down the cost of college education at every turn. Especially these huge schools, state schools as well, that have enormous endowments, should not be charging for, and that has to be something that's worked out in both the states and federal government.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.